I pulled up all the top 10 sign up bonuses, and this is like top 10 right now that you could just go get. You don't have to go work hard. They're all out there for everyone. And I looked at what if you just cashed them all out, right? Like, what if you took however many points you would get and cashed them out right away? And so the spend was a total amount of spend of $60,000 on the top 10 bonuses right now. And that would net you 955,000 points. I don't think I've used an Amex point, a couple million Amex points. I don't know if I've used Amex points in like 2 years. But what if you got the cash back and bought the points? Then where would you end up? And so I wanted to do a ton of research and dig into it and figure out whether you might have actually ended up better. And I think for a lot of people, the answer might be yes. You would have been better getting cash back for a multitude of reasons.
Hey there, points people. You just heard a clip from Chris Hutchins from the All the Hacks podcast. Chris is the creator and host of the top-ranked podcast All the Hacks, where he shares insights on optimizing life and finances. He has been featured in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, CNBC, and tons of other outlets. In this episode, expect to hear about when cashback rewards might be the way to go, when to consider other points earning strategies outside of just getting more and more sign-up bonuses, why $11,000 in the bank might be better than having 1 million points, and so much more. And if a cashback card is right for you, consider the Chase Freedom Flex card. This card earns 5% cash back in rotating categories every quarter. In addition, if you hold one of the Chase Sapphire cards or the Chase Ink Business Preferred, the points earned with a Chase Freedom Flex card can be combined into your Sapphire account to use with transfer partners as well. And remember, if you decide to apply for the Chase Freedom Flex card or any other card, please never apply directly through Google. Always use a friend or creator's referral link. And if you're interested in supporting this show when you apply for your next card, check out geobreezetravel.com/cards. And if you're not sure what card is right for you, I offer free credit card consultations at geobreezetravel.com/consultations. And we have links to the Chase Freedom Flex card and the free consultation form for you in the show notes as well. And now, on with the show. Welcome to the GeoBreeze Travel Podcast, a show for anyone wanting to level up their travel hacking lifestyle. I'm your host, Julia Menez. I'm a travel hacker, coach, speaker, Filipino-American ENTJ who loves solid travel gear and using shortcuts on spreadsheets. On this show, I'm on a mission to bring you travel hackers from all walks of life to help you level up your travel hacking game. We dive into credit cards, miles, points, strategy, mindset, and the secrets behind how to travel the world for next to no cost. So, let's get hacking. Hey, Chris. Welcome back to the GeoBreeze Travel Podcast.
I am excited to be back. It is a beautiful day here in California.
I am excited to be chatting with you today, and we can talk about a lot of different things, such as should we be paying more attention to cashback cards? I think a lot of people in the points world are always just like, points cards are always better than cashback cards. Like, cashback won't get you as far. You could get like 17 cents per point this way. But you recently did an episode on your podcast where you analyzed all of this. So before we dive in too deep, what are your initial thoughts about cashback versus the usual points and miles credit cards we know and love, and why should we maybe be paying attention more to cashback?
I think well, first of all, I was one of those people, right? Like you got to have a points card, forget earning cashback. Cashback is stupid. I don't even think I have a cashback card other than maybe my Amazon card, which I guess is an important segue eventually. But the thing that really changed was I started seeing all these posts where people were saying, oh, miles are on sale, points are on sale. And I was like, why would I buy points? I have them all for my card. And then I thought, what if I did the math? It's never going to work out to compare this 10 cent, 20 cent per point redemption to cash back. That's why we all went for the points, because of this crazy opportunity to get these super expensive flights for almost nothing. But what if you got the cash back and bought the points? Then where would you end up? And so I wanted to do a ton of research and dig into it and figure out whether you might have actually ended up better. And I think for a lot of people, the answer might be yes. You would have been better getting cash back for a multitude of reasons.
What are some of those reasons? Because I'm sure a lot of people are listening to this being like, but if you get cash back, You're getting like 1 or 2 cents per point versus those great aspirational redemptions that we all know and love and have seen or wished for.
So you can still get them. So I'm looking right here at an example. I looked at this United flight from New York to Geneva. It was $5,000 in cash and it was 63,000 life miles, right? So if you're like, wow, I've got some transferable points, I'm going to transfer it to Avianca and I'm going to book this flight. I scored a deal. I got who knows how many points per or cents per point, a lot. But Avianca was having a sale at the time and you could buy the points for $825. So is it fair to say that you really got that massive cents per point? I'm just doing the math, 63. So 8 cents per point. Is that fair if you could have just bought the points for $800? Probably not. And by the way, if you bought the points for $800, you were getting like 1.3 cents per point. You're not even getting that great of a redemption. In fact, the portal, you could argue, is a better use of your points than getting 1.3 cents. And so that sent me down this rabbit hole of, oh, what am I doing? By the way, I have millions of points that I'm not able to use as fast as I accrue them. And I'm watching them and I'm like, oop, United devaluation, oop, Turkish devaluation. Meanwhile, all my cash is in my bank account earning 5% in interest a year. And the value in that balance is going up and up and up. Now, it's going up and up to fight inflation. Yes, food, travel, everything are also getting more expensive. But it just made me wonder if I took even half the points in my balance and I'd gotten cash back and let that grow, where would it be? How much headache would it take out of a trip if I just had this travel fund and it was like, oh, points aren't good, buy the ticket, doesn't sting. Right now, man, I bet anyone listening who has a meaningful number of points right now, when they see no good deals and they have to spend cash back while they're watching their points do nothing, it just burns. You're like, I want to take a vacation and it's such a bad deal to use my points, so I'm not going to. I feel like that's been me for the last few years.
How are you earning so many points to where that balance is growing each year and you're like, I can't spend them fast enough and we're getting hit by devaluation? How are you just earning that many points that fast?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's the spending side of the equation is really my challenge now because we had kids. Now we have 4 people. We have an au pair. So if we're looking to go on a trip, it's a 4 to 5 person trip. And one, just doing that at any length with 1 and 3 year olds has been a lot. So we just have traveled less. And two, even if you do want to travel, it's pretty hard to find award availability for 4 or 5 people. Now we did, and we ended up taking a trip to Europe, and it ended up being about 420,000 points. But I probably accrue more than 420,000 points a year because I'm probably doing 2 or 3 sign up bonuses and optimizing spend, running a business, maybe planning a few group trips for some people, and probably nets me 500,000 points a year, maybe a little more, depending on the sign up bonus. I think if you are not trying to do 20 sign up bonuses a year and you really just target the top 3 or 4 a year, probably could be close to 250,000 points.
You said you spent about 420,000 points for 5 people to travel to Europe. Is that business class or?
Business. Yeah, business. It ended up being 105 each person, and one of the kids was under 2, so it was a lap infant. And I think we technically had to pay. By the way, lap infants are so expensive on certain airlines because some of them don't let you bring a child for free, and instead you pay 10% of the full fare ticket. So if you can find a great deal that you're like, it's inversely related, right? You find this great cent per point deal where you're like, the flight was $10,000 and I got it for 100,000 points. And they're like, cool. You've got to pay $1,000 for your lap infant because it's 10% of the full fare business class ticket. So I think the most expensive ticket for us was actually bringing the 1 year old. It was like $500, but there are only 4 seats in business, so we couldn't have booked them their own seat, which would have just been ridiculous, right? Like to book a lap infant in a business class seat, it almost felt like a waste.
Yeah, I think a lot of people assume that for you or me or anybody else who makes content about points, we're constantly traveling and constantly redeeming our points. But I think it's a good reminder to people that sometimes families take one big trip a year, 2 big trips a year, and you don't have to constantly be traveling to be, quote, good at points.
Yes. I wish we could. And by the way, we have flexible lifestyles. My wife and I both work on a podcast full time as our jobs. We could do it from anywhere. But we also optimize for other things. Like we pay a premium to live in the Bay Area because we really love it. Like we love our neighborhood, we love the weather. Like we just like being here. So the bar for vacation is so high. We don't have an awful winter where take me anywhere. Pretty good climate year round. We pay for it, right? Like it costs a lot to live here, but we're not just traveling to escape a season of humidity or a season of snow. So we're not traveling that much. Kids are in school. It turns out once your kid goes to school, we were doing the math. It's like you've got summer, then you've got Thanksgiving, Christmas, or holiday break. You've got the spring break, and some places have a ski break. And that's it. Like those are your travel windows, which are also the most expensive, impossible to find availability. And so I think miles and points in the family world just means you might take less trips. And bonus comes around 250,000 points, 150,000 points. You do that a few times, you've got that family trip covered for the year.
So which points have been sitting there the longest for you, where you're staring at them, getting devalued, and you're like, shouldn't even have these anymore. I might need to burn them on something not optimal.
I don't think I've used an Amex point, a couple million Amex points. I don't know if I've used Amex points in like 2 years. I guess I could look at the revision history of this Google spreadsheet. It'd be so depressing and be like, when did I first make my points and miles tracking spreadsheet? And how many points did I have back when I first made it? And which balances haven't changed? But I don't know if I want to see that number.
That was actually a very surprising answer because Amex has so many different transfer partners. I thought you were going to say something like, I've got a lot of United points and I have to use them with United, but you're not even transferring your Amex points anywhere.
Yeah, I think the irreversibility of transfers has me a little bit like, ooh, I don't know. And so if I'm taking a United flight and it's, yeah, I could transfer them to Air Canada, but then if I change the flight, now I'm stuck with Air Canada points. So like sometimes I'll just use the United points and burn that balance down. I have had some Korean Air SkyPass points since Chase removed Korean Air as a transfer partner. I did like a Hail Mary. I was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to need these, but it's my last chance. So we transferred 160,000 to me and my wife's account on Korean Air. And they do not last forever. As of now, thanks to the pandemic, maybe one of the only good things to come out of it is flexibility of airline rules. We have till 2028 to use 320,000 Korean Air points. So those have an expiration. But yeah, everything else, I haven't used 50,000 choice points for I don't even know how long, but they expire in July. So I got to find a use case.
So with the Amex points, at least you could cash them out with a Schwab card or something like that. Is that something you'd want to look into, or you're like, they're there, we'll keep them there?
It's so the answer mathematically is I probably should. That is the correct answer. I should get the Schwab card. I should transfer to a brokerage, get 1.1 cents per point. And then I'm like, but what if I want to go on some trip? And I'm like, then I have other points. But I just can't bring myself to do it. I think one of the challenges people who love to optimize their lives face is like making any decision that might have an unoptimal outcome seems so daunting. And it's like, well, staying in this might also be unoptimal, but there's at least I've already made that decision. I don't doing nothing just seems so much easier than doing something, even though the doing something might be better.
Yeah, because if you had, let's say, 1 million points that you could cash out with Amex, Capital One, Chase, something that you're allowed to cash out, where you're like, it's going to look really bad if I just take this 1 million points, turn it into $10,000 and put that into index funds or some investment or something like that. If for some reason something came up in your life where you're like, we're not traveling for a while, there was a health issue, there was like something else in life that happened, I've got 1 million points. Should I just let them sit here and then in 2 or 3 years when we're good to travel again, then we can use them? Maybe. Like, how would you advise somebody work through that decision if somebody had some life event happen where they're like, we realistically are not going to be traveling internationally for the next 2 years or so? Should I cash out my points? Should I like let them sit?
Money and you have points. Yeah, you should cash out those points. Like I think I realize I'm coming from a place of some privilege and some savings discipline to say if I cashed out the million Amex points or $10,000, like I'm not in a place in my life where I need the $10,000. If I did, absolutely. Who cares about the vacation? Like you need to pay some medical bills, of course. And so I wouldn't hesitate to do that in a minute. One of the interesting things that opened my eyes to this is I talked to Zach Resnick, who started this company Fly Flat. and they basically sell flights using points that they've brokered. So if you're like, I want to go on a flight, I don't have any points, you can buy the flight at less than the business class flight would cost because they're brokering points on the background. And in the episode, he shared some of the nuance and craziness of what's going on behind the scenes in the points brokerage world. But people who accumulate millions and millions of points who are very, very smart, get rid of them from 1 to 1.1 cents. No doubt, very smart people with lots of points have gotten comfortable with that redemption value. They're not trying to get 1.5, they're not trying to get 1.9, like they're just fine at 1 to 1.1 cents. So you can make a case that if you have an unlimited ability to get more points, cashing it out would make sense at that rate. That's what other smart people do. You just can't travel enough. But something in my mind is holding me back. And it's the same thing that holds me back from unoptimally using points. And so the experiment this year is the opposite. We've decided there is a 30-day window from late July to late August where all of the obligations are unnecessary. Like we can go anywhere we want. We can go slow. Now, the unfortunate thing is there are a lot of places I really want to go that July and August is a terrible time of year to go. But we decided that's the window and we're going to go somewhere. And I somewhat in like a masochistic way, like I look forward to having to pay an egregious number of points that still makes it a better deal than cash, but just isn't a dream redemption because it will be like forced discipline to be using the points.
Which is still better than having them sit there. A lot of people get some kind of joy seeing a balance of 4 million points or 2 million points where they're like, I've accumulated this for the last however many years and I don't want to let go of these points. But just a reminder to everyone, once again, the purpose of all of this entire points and miles game is to redeem the points, not to post screenshots of how many points you have.
Yes. Yeah. Like I see it as a badge of dishonor, like it's not, I'm not like, look at all these points. I'm like, I've played a game to an end that I haven't been able to use. What's going on? I got to figure something out. And so I am finding solace in the fact that in a few years, our kids will be old enough that I think traveling is going to be a lot more interesting, right? Anyone listening who has young children knows that it's like, it's not fun to be on a long flight with a 1-year-old or an 18-month-old. Around 2.5, 3 gets a little better. And I'm really excited for that. It's still not as fun. You've got naps when you're 2.5, but once we're at the point where the kids aren't napping and you can like make a day out of roaming around a city and you don't have to go trek back to the hotel for 2 hours, I think it'll be a lot more fun and easier to use points. And hopefully I'll have very few points in the future.
So that would be for people who already have a lot of points where they're like, oh, maybe I should cash them out, maybe I shouldn't. What about people who are earning points and they're like, all right, we take 1 or 2 big family trips a year. It's going to cost 500,000 points. We spend enough money to earn that pretty easily with sign-up bonuses and just organic spend, business expenses. Would you recommend that a family in that situation, or even just a person or a couple in that situation, still optimize for the points and miles cards that we've been talking about for the last few years? Or should they mix in some cards that offer maybe 5% cash back instead of 3 points per dollar?
Yeah. So an interesting thing I looked at, I pulled up like the best 10 bonuses that I've seen on credit cards across a lot of different cards. And it was like 17.3 cents per point was like, or sorry, points per dollar. 17.3 points per dollar was the rate that you could earn from sign-up bonuses from the top 10. Sure, the best one was like 26 points per dollar, but like on average, 17 points per dollar. But even the best 10 right now aren't that different. And so I think it was probably like 16 or 17 or something. Like it wasn't that much lower, meaning right now is about as good a time as ever to open up a bunch of cards. Why I say that is if you really want to be maximizing, you shouldn't care whether you're earning 5 or 3 or 2 or 5 or 4 points per dollar on any category. Like you really, the sign up bonuses are the game in town. And I think most people listening know that, but I've never really put the numbers next to each other. It's like I could spend hours trying to make sure I have the best card to eke out my spend on certain categories, but I'm getting 5 times as many points on that category if I'm just meeting a sign up bonus. Now, I've had to just accept that I don't want to be the person that's opening up 10 cards a year. It's just too much work. That's probably like a financially poor decision in that I'd be better off doing that. But I don't know, I created a rule where I'm like, one card a quarter is the max. And so outside of that, I would just look on a category by category basis. And when it's the math swings obviously in one direction, great. When it is actually the same card that's the best, even better, right? Dining spend, I think the Amex Gold is the best card out there for earning return on dining because you get points or you get 4.4 cents per dollar if you had the Schwab Platinum card and you transferred the 4 points you earned into money. And then look and see how it feels. I think some categories like Amazon, like mobile wallet spend, maybe even the everything else category, you're probably just better off getting cash back. If you can meet all the needs you have every year in points for trips, but also you could buy them if you can't. And maybe that's complicated if you're playing a hybrid approach because yeah, you might not be able to buy the Aeroplan points that you can transfer to. You might be able to buy Avianca points, and now you're booking you and your partner and your kids on 3 different airlines, even though it's the same seat. So I could make a case just for simplicity's sake to do one or the other. But if you have enough points, I would say just pick off the categories one by one, and any category that it's close or it's a clear winner for cash back, maybe try, see what that feels like. That's my plan. My plan is to switch my everything else category to the Robinhood Gold card. And according to an email this morning, I am 3 referrals away from getting an invite, but we'll see if that ever happens.
That's a card that I haven't looked into much at all. Tell us about that Robinhood card. Like, why would you make that your go-to card for everything?
It's going to be according to everything. And I don't know anyone that's gotten the card yet. I don't know anyone that's seen what your limit will be yet, but it is going to be, or is marketed to be, a 3% on everything cashback card. So anything that you're not earning a multiplier on, 3% is probably pretty good. If you have a Venture or Venture X card, you're getting 2x points. You're basically saying, I'm going to take 3 cents over 2 points. You're valuing the points at 1.5 cents. Could I buy points for that? Probably, depending on the place. Yeah, like I could, depending on certain places. But at this point, all I'm doing is just adding more points to the balance. I'm not actually redeeming them. And so I want to see what it feels like to get that cash back. I want to put it in a separate account so I can watch that balance go up. I can watch it earn interest. The other thing I noticed was I ran through this analysis, and it's going to get a little in the weeds. So I'm going to try to make a concise version of it. If you want the deeper version, the episode I did on points versus cash back, you can go check it out. But both decisions are reversible. If you earn points, you can cash them out. And if you earn cash back, you can buy points. What I found was, unless you need a ridiculously large number of points, like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of points, the reversibility of going to cash back doesn't usually result in that much of a loss, whereas the reversibility of going from points to cash back does. So I think I did some math of someone was going after all cashback cards for all their spend and then decided they needed points, so they bought them all. And they were like 5% behind where they would have been if they had just earned points. But if they went all points and decided they need cash back, it was something like 15% or 20% behind trying to convert them out to cash. And so that left me in a point thinking, wow, like they're both reversible, but like one of them is less reversible or a lower impact. So I don't know, that took me down a path of maybe it's all wrong. And I would say maybe because it's not as fun, right? Like it's fun to take a free vacation. It's not fun to take a vacation where you pay the money and it's cash back that you earned for free. But once you earned it, it feels like you're spending your own money. It's not monopoly money like the points. They're not in my bank account. They don't show up on my net worth. Maybe they should.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Talk a little bit more about the psychology of people are like, but I want this like for free as possible. I don't want to buy Avianca points at 1.5 cents per point or whatever super cheap valuation they sell it at when they're selling Avianca points. It still hurts people more to buy $500 worth of points rather than to cash out 30,000
I mean,
points.
this is the challenge. I'll go one other place and come back. I did this whole analysis of health insurance and all the different plans you can buy. And what I found, which was really surprising, was that if you had unlimited money, the most expensive fancy platinum PPO plan per month was going to cost in California for our family of our ages about $3,900 a year or a month. Super expensive. However, the cheapest high deductible health plan that was like bronze was going to be like $1,900. So you would save $2,000 a month, which over the course of a year would save you $24,000 a year, and the deductible was much less than $24,000. So you would be better off just getting the cheapest plan, paying out of pocket the first something like, I want to say it was like $15,000. Go listen to the episode for the details. But you would save about $9,000 a year overdoing the platinum plan in a year where you spent all the deductible. Now, in a year where you didn't and you didn't see the doctor once, you would have saved almost $20,000. So in every circumstance, I was like, this was a better deal. And they had the same network, so that was not a factor in this case. So why would someone do that? Because it really burns. If you're like, oh, my kid's sick, do I want to take him to the doctor? This doctor's visit's going to cost $500. Am I going to be rational? Am I going to look at my balance of my account and say, well, I saved $2,000 this month getting the cheaper plan. Do I want to spend 500 to go? I should, because it's free. My wife and I looked at each other. Like, no, we won't make that decision. Like, we know that we might not actually take our kid to the doctor if it's going to cost $500, because we're like, maybe it's just a cold, let's ride it out. And we didn't want to put ourselves in that situation. And for our own health, right? Like, oh, I think I broke my foot. Maybe let's wait a couple days and see if it gets better. That actually did happen. But I did go the same day because I wasn't sure. And I thought I had something wrong. And I went to the emergency room once and it was like $20,000. But my insurance covered it, so it was 150, and they couldn't figure it out. And the next day was even worse. And I went to the emergency room again. Can you imagine if you had to pay out of pocket making a decision like that? Like, it's Saturday morning, my doctor's not going to be able to see me till Monday. Do I want to spend an extra $20,000 or whatever your deductible is? No, that's not how our brains work. Even though you saved all the money it was going to cost you by choosing this lower plan. So I would tell someone listening, if you know your own psychology and you're not going to be able to take that awesome trip if it requires spending the dollars you got from cash back, even if the cash back was greater than the value of the points, then maybe the points is better because it allows you to take a vacation that you wouldn't otherwise take. So that was a little bit of a roundabout story, but if I look at my own psychology, there's no way I would have spent the money to go on some of these redemptions, stay at some of these hotels. If I had to pay out of pocket, it would just burn too much.
Even if you earned all of that out of pocket stuff, getting cash back instead of points where it all evened out, I think you're right, where it just hurts a lot more for people to be like, even though this emergency fund is earmarked for travel, this is our travel account, there's always that thing in the back of your mind where you're like, should I use it for something else? Should I use it to pay off debt, or should I invest that money, or should I use it for something for my kids? Should I use it for groceries or gas? Whereas with points, you're like, well, I mean, I can't pay my rent with points anyway. So like points feel like fake money, whereas cashback feels like real money, and it hurts a little bit more to spend it, even if all math and rationale says, yeah, you should just take the 5% cash back instead of the 3 points per dollar.
Yeah. And look at your points, though. Here's an idea that I haven't actually done myself, but now I'm going to start doing it because I like this idea. Every point currency has a way to redeem that currency for something like cash back, whether it's booking travel with in a portal, whether it's statement credits, whether it's transferring to your brokerage firm. Go take all your points balances, next to them all, put that value and the cashback value, not like the points guy, what are these points worth value, but how much, if you wanted to redeem these for cash, would they be worth? And then every time you're booking flights, sorry to anyone who this takes the fun out of it for you, but it's like now you're like, oh, I'm going to go on this trip to Europe. It's 420,000 points. What could I have gotten for that cash back? Let's assume they were Amex points. I could have gotten $4,620. So yeah, it felt free, but I paid 46.20 for that trip, right? Because I had the like that those points could have very easily just been transferred to cash at a rate somewhere around that point. And then see if that's hard for you. Maybe it's not. I think I've enjoyed living in the dark of not doing that math in the past, but if I started doing it, maybe I would get comfortable with the fact that I am someone who clearly likes to spend 5 grand on flights for a vacation. I've just proven that. If you asked me, are you the kind of person that would spend $5,000 to buy flights for a trip? I'd be like, no, that's not me. Well, I'm wrong. Like I did that. So clearly that is me. And I just have to get comfortable with that version of me, which will hopefully help me get comfortable spending the $5,000 to go on the trip. And, but I think it's really key. If you want aspirational travel, cash back is only a strategy that will be better off if you buy points or find ways to buy points to end up booking those flights. Because if you just bought the business class flight for $5,000 instead of the Avianca points for $800, you're every time going to end up worse off.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because people, whenever they're thinking cash back versus points, they're like, I don't want to spend $5,000. Like, I should just earn points instead and spend 63,000 points. You are not supposed to be comparing $5,000 versus 63,000 points in this case. You should be comparing $800, which is what it would cost approximately to buy 63,000 points. 800 versus 63,000.
Exactly. And in that case, it probably makes sense. It also gives you a lot more flexibility. There are a lot of great Hilton hotels out there, probably stayed at some, but it always seems like a bad deal to transfer my points to Hilton from every single one of my credit cards. You know why? Because it is a bad deal. Like it feels like a bad deal because it is. Same with Marriott. Like it never feels like that's an option. So we all just look for places to stay that are Hyatt properties because it's the only place we can stay that we feel like we get a good deal from our points, unless we already have a balance of Hilton or Marriott points. But buying points kind of removes that, right? If you can buy points for Hilton at half a cent, which they're often on sale for, okay, now Hilton seems like a great option. Now I have so many more hotels I can stay at. It changes the landscape of what you can do because it doesn't restrict you to only things that work with points. And on the hotel side, there are some places where it actually, funny enough, might make more sense to just take your points, go to cash, and buy Hilton points. If we did the math on Built 1-to-1, if you could redeem your Built points for 1 penny and buy 2 Hilton points with that penny, you'd be twice as good as if you transferred your points. So in some cases, the best way to book some of these hotels is actually to cash out your points and buy the points, even if they're transfer partners.
Yeah, that's very true for things like Hilton, IHG, and Marriott, and a few of the airline partners as well, where the valuations are not as good. You very much might be better off cashing out your points and then purchasing points with that cash back that you got. And to add another layer of complexity to this too, where I know you were like, people don't really want to do the math of, okay, I spent 500,000 points for my family to fly to Europe in business class. Would I rather have that experience or $5,000 in my bank account? Once it turns into an investment account where people start doing crazy math of, and then it compounds at 7 or 8% per year. If I just had taken that $5,000, invested it, like where would we be in 20 years? Then that math does get kind of crazy. And that's where it's a slippery slope because, yeah, that could be great retirement money, but also I don't want it to turn into some version of don't drink lattes, except don't travel.
Yes. Yeah. Like I want people to go travel. And if one of these methods is going to make it easier for you to travel, great. But I think there's also something we haven't talked about is the pressure to get like an aspirationally amazing redemption. We laugh because we have an au pair and she just went to Mount Rushmore. And I was like, well, I've never been to Mount Rushmore. Should we go there for vacation? And in the back of my mind, I'm like, no, we should be going to the Maldives. Like we should be going to all these places that are the best redemptions to get the most value out of your points. And if I was thinking about it on a straight cash basis, like maybe I wouldn't be thinking that way. And maybe I wouldn't feel the pressure to go on these crazy vacations. I love it. It's so much fun, especially 10 years ago when I had, not a care in the world and way fewer responsibilities. But now I just have to wonder whether I'm letting the points dictate the kind of vacation I want to take because of how I can get the most value out of them. And I'm trying to force myself in my life at this age to, and I say at this age, like I'm about to turn 40 this year. I'm not that old, but I just want to take the vacation I want to take. And it sometimes when you have a family, you're like, I'd rather stay at an Airbnb. Oh, but it's way better to stay at Hyatt's because my points transfer there better. Like it forces you to go down this path of wanting to take the trip that maximizes your points instead of take the trip you want. And I did this episode with a guy named Bill Perkins, wrote a book, Die with Zero. And he actually inspired the London trip because I was talking to him and I was like, well, we just want to go on a trip and we want to go to London, but it's around the holidays and it's always so many points. And so we always were saying no. And he's like, dude, stop optimizing for getting the most value, optimize for taking the trip. Like, just go on the trip. Is it a bad deal? Who cares? Like, you're at a point in life where you're going to die with millions of points if you don't start using them. Focus on doing the thing, get the most fulfillment out of your life, and not focus on the highest number of points in your balance or your net worth.
I think this is especially true for people who aren't even content creators. Like you and I are doing reports to our audiences about, oh, here's how many points it took to do this trip. Here's the sticker price. Here's like my valuation. And what really baffles me is so many people get into doing that type of analysis for themselves. And you don't even have to report this to any of your 20 followers if you're just on Instagram recreationally, because people are like, oh, am I going to get kicked out of some imaginary lunch table if I'm not getting 17 cents per point too? And Chris, when you and I do these types of trip reports, it's mostly for transparency to show our audiences here's what's possible. But I also try to show, oh, I had to get back home. So we got 2 cents per point on Singapore Airlines because I had to get home. There's those types of valuations too. But especially if this is just a hobby for you and it's not your literal job, you don't have to report to anybody. You don't have to report to me. You don't have to report to Instagram about like, and I got this much valuation. Just if you have points anyway, and for everybody listening, if you have more points, just sitting there where you're like, they're getting devalued every year. I don't know what to do with these United points. Just use them for whatever trip you want to do. And if the United points are already sitting there and you get less than 2 cents per point, that is still better than getting no trip this year, and next year you get even less of a trip because it got devalued again.
Yeah. Optimize for taking a trip. Try not to get held up on the value of your points and consider, if you're not going to play the sign up bonus game, I would say consider cash back on a category by category basis. That would be my advice, is look through your categories. And Amazon is a great one where I don't think, except for maybe this quarter on a Freedom card, I don't think normally there is a card that beats using the Amazon Prime Visa and getting 5% cash back. Same with Target, 5% back. Like, you realize, oh, wow, 5% was a good deal. Maybe recalibrate what your threshold is. And you're like, oh, maybe 3% on everything is a good deal too.
You said this is for people not playing the sign up bonus game. What if you are playing the sign up bonus game? Are there cashback cards where it might make sense to just get the really big cash back? No.
If you want to play that game, it would be get the sign up bonus and cash it out, right? The best cashback sign up bonus is get a huge Amex bonus and also have the Schwab Platinum and transfer your points out. There are not a lot of cashback cards with really, really high value sign up bonuses. So if I look at the list, all these sign up bonuses are all points cards. Many of them chase Amex Capital One and the City Premier, or I guess now the City Strata Premier. But all those cards would be the cards that have the best ROI on your spend for a sign up bonus standpoint. The question to you is, do you keep them as points or do you convert them to cash back? And that's the tough one. But I think the sign up bonus game with cash back is pretty lame unless you want to do it a lot more frequently. There are cards where it's like earn $200 after you spend $500. And on like a percentage ROI basis, that's actually really good. But on a, if you had, let's call it $20,000 a year of spend and the sign up bonus had a really high ROI, but it was on $500 of spend. Well, now all of a sudden you're going to be opening up 40 cards a year. That doesn't make a lot of sense. And so I think that just becomes a lot. Now, could you and a player two open 40 cards in a year? Yeah, you could probably do it. I honestly, that is a topic that I want to learn more about because even I don't feel like I have a good sense of realistically, if someone would just map out what cards I could open up without totally ruining my ability to jump on something new, that'd be great. But I don't know the answer to that. But I know it's easy to do once a quarter, so I haven't worried about it.
We actually interviewed somebody way back in the day on the show. They were like OG episodes. Stephen and Lauren from Trip of a Lifestyle, and that was their exact strategy was they would just sign up for many, many cards. And instead of trying to figure out, oh, what do we do with all these points? They would just cash out the sign up bonus, put it into index funds, and they just did budget travel where they were like, are, and they're retired early. They retired, I think, before age 30. They were teachers, so that it's not like they had high paying tech jobs or anything. They were just signing up for Chase Freedom Flex, Chase Freedom Unlimited here and there, Chase Sapphire, Capital One. As soon as the bonus hit, they weren't even worried about like redeeming their points in the most optimal way. They would just cash it out, dump that cash into index funds so that it would compound interest year over year into their retirement fund. And by retirement, I mean early retirement in their 30s. And then whenever they needed to travel, they would just find like a cheap hotel, like cheap flights. They were going for what's the best way to do this budget travel. And they weren't running out of any money because they were just constantly cashing out these sign up bonuses, putting it into either high yield savings accounts if they needed it liquid or index funds if they wanted it to compound for the long term. And that's just how they were funding their travel, which I thought was a very different and interesting strategy versus how so many of us who listen to this podcast are trying to do things where they're like, okay, but will I get more out of Capital One points? They don't transfer to Hyatt versus Chase points versus Amex. Like, oh, there's this really big like Qatar sign up. Should I sign up for that? They were just like, what's the cash value of the sign up bonus? All right, cool. Liquidate that, dump it into an index fund account or high yield savings account. And we're just going to draw from that to do our budget travel, which is very different.
Yeah, I love that. I just did some quick math on a spreadsheet literally just now. So bear with me. I pulled up all the top 10 sign up bonuses, and this is like top 10 right now that you could just go get. You don't have to go work hard. They're all out there for everyone. And I looked at what if you just cashed them all out, right? Like, what if you took however many points you would get and cashed them out right away? And so the spend was a total amount of spend of $60,000 on the top 10 bonuses right now. And that would net you 955,000 points. So yeah, you'd get almost just shy of a million points, which is pretty great, or about $11,000, which is a blended rate of getting somewhere between 1 and 1.5 cents. It might be even higher if you want to factor in travel portals and that kind of stuff. Kind of cool, right? Like I bet the average couple could pretty easily open up 10 cards in a year if you have two people. So you got to ask yourself, do you want a million points to go take crazy aspirational travel? Or do you want $11,000 tax free, by the way, like cash back? You don't have to pay taxes on cash back, just like you don't pay taxes on your points because they're treated like a rebate on your spend. So kind of cool. Like $11,000 for a lot of people could take you further than you would let yourself go for 955,000 points. Now, could you get a better value? Could you say, hey, this year we're going to go to the Maldives and we're going to fly Emirates first class? Or could we take 3 vacations to national parks? But like, which one do you really want? Do you really care about it? Or do you just feel like you have to do the fancy thing because that's the best way to get the most value? And I think that's something that the older I am, the more I'm questioning, what am I really doing all this for? I don't want to go to Maldives. It's been on the list forever. And my wife and I are like, why do we want to go to the Maldives? It's so far away. If we really need that, Tahiti's way closer. And we've done that a few times. The Maldives is no longer on the list, but like 10 years ago, I would have been trying to figure out a way to fly for 27 hours to go to the Maldives. Now, will I end up there one day? Probably. Am I going to do it on points? Probably. But it's not as big of a priority as it was before.
I'm exactly the same way where every time I find these deals to Maldives, which we find for clients all the time because it's probably one of our top requested destinations, or even if I find something to Tahiti, French Polynesia, and I'm like, hey, to my husband, do you want to go to Tahiti? He's like, not really. What are we going to do there? I'm just going to get sunburned and we're going to get bored. Like, we like traveling to cities. So why go there if we could instead go to Lima, Peru, or France, or Toronto, or Japan, or Korea, or like somewhere with
actual public transit infrastructure, which is how we like to travel. So he's like, why would we go somewhere that we're not even going to enjoy just for the gram, which don't live life for the gram, everyone.
Definitely not.
With those top 10 bonuses, I'm sure some people are wondering, like, what are the top ones that you would go for right now? Which ones are on your list where you would get the 955,000 points?
Yeah, so if I run through them, funny enough, from a ROI standpoint, the autograph card was spend 1,000, get 20,000 points. So that's a Wells Fargo card. I had the Venture, the Platinum, the Business Platinum, Gold, Sapphire Preferred, the Autograph Journey, the City Premier, and the Ink Business Preferred. I think that was 10. Maybe that was 9, and the Ink Unlimited. And then somehow I have the gold on here again. So maybe one's supposed to be the business gold. This list is not perfect science or published anywhere, but pretty good. Like all those bonuses are going to get you somewhere in the neighborhood of 14 to, it looks like the best is 20.8 or 21.5 points per dollar spent.
Not bad at all.
Obviously, keep an eye out for content you're making, content I'm making, newsletters we're writing. I'm sure you, just like I do, try to let people know when there's great offers and things to check out. And you've got, links for people. I've got links for people. Support your fellow content creators, but get the best deal, right? Like always, I always tell everyone in my audience, like, go find the best deal. And I might not always have a link. I just shared the City Strata Premier link. It's not a link that supports me in any way, but it is a link that gets you 75,000 points. So it just happens to just be at citycards.com.
So you mentioned earlier you don't want to be opening 5 cards a year or something, or 10 cards a year. But with this strategy of if you get these 10 cards, you get 1,000,000 points. And I know you have a lot of these cards already, but for you, why don't you just want to keep getting sign up bonuses over and over again? Because in this episode, we mentioned that's the way to get the most points
I
per
know.
dollar.
I think one challenge is I like playing games once I feel like I understand them. And I just don't feel like I totally understand all the nuance of card sequencing. And then the second is I feel like I get a lot of satisfaction out of being able to get a new thing. So, like, I've used the Venture X a ridiculous amount. And there were a lot of people who, when the Venture X came out, they'd opened too many cards. They like couldn't get the Venture X because Capital One's a pretty strict issuer. And I think a part of me doesn't want to be in a situation where something new will come out that actually makes sense to get. And I'm like, oh, not eligible. Like you're over 524. So it's a chase card not happening. You've had too many recent cards. It's a Capital One card not happening. So I think a part of me is like, I don't feel like I totally understand the system. There's some nuance to not just the issuer specific rules, like a card every 90 days, but like, how do they look at your credit profile and decide what to do? And part of the reason I don't think I understand the system is because nobody understands. It's a little bit of a black box for everyone. And I like struggle to play games where I don't understand the rules. And so I think that's one big reason is I'm like, well, I don't want to get too many. And then I don't know why. Who cares if I get declined? I'm not opening up a mortgage anytime soon. But I think a part of me was like, I don't want to go down this like Amex pop-up jail declined for every card kind of situation. But I feel like I probably should do a few more. But I don't know. Now I'm like, just so I have more points. It just seems so ridiculous at this point. I've outlined a handful of cards that I think are going to drive me towards a place of spending more in line with what I want to see the return profile look like, which is really Robinhood and the US Bank Altitude Reserve card. I feel like those two cards for most people are like no-brainer, awesome cards where the return you're going to get with cash back is like irrefutably better than the return you're going to get with points. And so for those two cards, I have this sequence of cards I want to get. And I'm like, that there's 3 or 4 cards on that sequence. And they're more about perks and benefits than they are about sign up bonuses. And the crazy thing, which is irrational, is whatever amount of cash back I would get from the US Bank Altitude Reserve by earning like 3x on mobile wallet, which is basically Costco, there's no world that in 3 years, or 5 years, the amount of extra cash back I'd get on that card is going to equate to the amount of return I'd get opening up another business platinum card with a 250,000 point sign up bonus. Like, not a chance. But there's something that feels really good that's totally irrational about making sure that every category of spending I'm spending is efficient. And I don't know, I'll call it the optimizer's curse. It's like, why am I trying to optimize for something that matters so insignificantly when I could just open one card and it would do better than all the optimization for the year? I don't know.
I'm trying to optimize for convenience a lot of the time, where I'm just like, oh, we could just keep going hard with opening more and more cards and more sign-up bonuses. But like you said, for what? More points? I'm also at this stage of my life, I'm like, we have enough points. We take 3 big trips, 3 or 4 as a couple. We spend enough money to where we're earning points organically, throw in a couple sign-up bonuses each year. Like, eventually it'll level out to where it's pretty self-sustaining. And I know a lot of beginners who are listening to this are like, it feels like it will never be self-sustaining. I promise you, someday, 5 years down the line or something, once you've been in this game for a while, it becomes pretty self-sustaining and it's not that hard, or not nearly as hard as it was in the beginning. I also always encourage people to just work backwards and say, what kind of travel do you actually want to take? Figure out what kind of travel you actually want to do, price out how many points it takes, what kind of points you need, and then let that drive your decisions for your cards instead of just math for somebody else's life.
I don't really post. Like, I have a podcast weekly and I have a newsletter every 2 weeks, hopefully weekly soon. And I have an Instagram post a year. I've given up on trying to share the trips we're taking.
Maybe we'll hear about them someday on your podcast. And speaking of, this has been a fantastic episode, and I'll link to your episode on your podcast where you talked about more cashback versus points analysis for anybody who wants to dive deeper into this topic. But where can people find you if they are interested in learning more about your podcast or your once a year Instagram post or your newsletter or anything else like that?
Yeah, if you're listening to a podcast, you can just search All the Hacks. If you go to allthehacks.com, there's a link to the newsletter, link to the episodes, link to YouTube, link to contact. I read everything. I write back. So let me know. I actually don't have a link. By the time this comes out, I'll put a link on the website to the crazy spreadsheet I built to optimize all your spending categories. But I don't actually think there is a link on the website. So you'll have to find it in the episode you link to. But yeah, All the Hacks, wherever you want. Search it on Google.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, Chris. It's always a pleasure to chat with you about all of these different analytics and how to optimize your life. So thank you so much for coming onto the show again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the GeoBreeze Travel Podcast. If any of the cards mentioned in today's episode piqued your interest, please check out the links in the show notes for more information on any of the cards. Also, if you apply for a card using the links on that page, I may receive a commission too, so please and thank you. P.S. I hear the links work better in Internet Explorer or Safari, and sometimes the credit card applications tend to glitch out in Chrome. Additionally, it would mean the world to me if you could subscribe to this podcast, leave a 5-star review, and share it with a friend. And if you would like to make even more travel hacking friends, please sign up for the Patreon to access our monthly masterclass hangouts. We dive deep into a particular points program each month, and you'll get to ask all of your travel hacking questions and enjoy being around other people who enjoy points and miles just as much as you and I do. If you would like an invite to the next one, head over to geobreezetravel.com/hangouts to sign up to be on the invite list. Take care and happy travels!